Steve, really appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you. Well, now that Steve Bannon is out of the White House, he seems to be on a revenge mission to make life miserable for everyone left in that White House, and very much including tonight Donald Trump. Here's Steve Bannon. Here's how he campaigned in Alabama yesterday against Donald Trump's candidate for Senate.
Mitch McConnell and this permanent political class is the most corrupt and incompetent group of individuals in this country. They think you're a pack of morons. They think you're nothing but rubes. And tomorrow, you're going to get an opportunity to tell them what you think of the elites that run this country.
And there's the monster that Donald Trump created. And tonight, Steve Bannon's candidate has won. Steve Bannon's winning candidate for the seat is, of course, the former state Supreme Court justice who was suspended twice from that job. Once for installing a monument to the Ten Commandments at the courthouse, and the second time for refusing to comply with a ruling of the United States Supreme Court. And there's Judge Moore up there tonight accepting the victory that he has earned there in Alabama. Last night, Steve Bannon actually publicly said why Donald Trump's judgment cannot be trusted.
They try to destroy Donald Trump. The same gang that's going after Roy Moore is the same gang that went after Donald Trump. And I got to tell you, I think it's sometime later after tomorrow, a real, review has to be done of how President Trump got the wrong information and came down on the wrong side of the football here.
And we're joined now by Mike Murphy, a political media consultant for the Republican Party. Also joining us is Jason Johnson, politics editor at TheRoot.com, and MSNBC contributor Ron Klain, former senior aide to President Obama, chief of staff to Vice Presidents Biden and Gore, and Mike Murphy. I know you've been hoping to live a long life, but I do not think you ever expected you would live long enough to see the drama, or whatever you want to call this thing, that has just played out in Alabama. Steve Bannon versus Donald Trump, and trying to convince voters in Alabama that Donald Trump's judgment cannot be trusted. And the way to help Donald Trump is to vote for the Bannon candidate.
Yes, cats chasing dogs. We're going into Shakespearean bizarro land here. And I think now it'll at least be amusing to people who like the theater of politics, because Trump will not be able to stand being beaten by his own mastermind. You know, the minute Bannon became famous, his days were over in the White House. So now I think what'll happen is, one, we're going to have Bannon will get drunk on this and go out and predict a lot more Republican primaries, and he'll be able to recruit some candidates. Now, the problem is, Alabama, I've worked there. I actually did Sessions' first race. It's very special. And so I don't know if this formula will repeat, but at least more primaries will happen. I think Bannon on Trump violence will dramatically increase, and Republican candidates are going to have a challenge, because this guy Moore makes Todd Aiken look like Nelson Rockefeller. They're going to be asked about him in his crazy positions. They're going to have to distance themselves a bit. It's going to be interesting if Trump will really endorse and get behind this guy. He'll want to get credit for his likely but not certain win, but then Trump will be tarnished by some of these positions, and it's kind of hard to tarnish the president with some of the things he's done. So well, this is going to be complicated.
Yeah, and of course, Mike, Donald Trump, when he was campaigning for his candidate, promised that he would immediately endorse and work for the other guy if the other guy won, as he just did. And I want to go to that video that Steve Kornacki was talking about, where Donald Trump actually said, while he's up there on the stage with his candidate endorsing him, I may have made a mistake, and the Moore campaign was able to turn that into a commercial. Let's just watch the way Trump said that.
And I might have made a mistake, and I'll be honest. I might have made a mistake. If Luther doesn't win, they're not going to say we picked up 25 points in a very short period of time. They're going to say Donald Trump, the President of the United States, was unable to pull his candidate across the line. It is a terrible, terrible moment for Trump. This is total embarrassment.
And Jason, Donald Trump has just tweeted his congratulations to Roy Moore.
I'm not surprised. This reminds me of what he said about Mike Pence. You know, he wasn't happy about Mike Pence either, and he basically said, look, if I could have had Bobby Knight, I would have taken him. But I think the important thing to remember here, for every Republican who's running in 2018 in the Senate, you have to remember, number one, Donald Trump is not a trustworthy surrogate. You don't know what he's going to say when he gets on stage. And two, look, Steve Bannon was one of the keys to Trump getting elected. He's He's Liam Neeson. He has a special set of skills of being able to sort of rationalize and make this sort of white nationalist populism sound decent to people. And if he can sell this outside of Alabama, there's a lot of Republicans across the country who will be worried going into 2018.
And, Ron, what do the Democrats see when they look at this tonight?
Well, they see that Senator Strange was beaten by candidate even stranger. I mean, you know, the most extreme Republican possibly got nominated, and it shows a lot of opportunity for Democrats. Now, Alabama, Doug Jones, still a long shot, but has a shot against Judge Roy Moore. We saw, because of what's going on in Alabama, Senator Corker, a shoo-in for re-election in Tennessee, stepped down. Now that's an open seat. And in Florida tonight, for the 7th time, a state legislative seat flipped from R to D. We picked up a seat in a special election in Florida. So I think Democrats are seeing that the division in the Republican Party is creating a lot of opportunities.
We're going to bring you whatever Roy Moore has to say. He's been doing a lot of thanks to people, and well, we'll dip into it for a few seconds just to get a flavor of what he has to say.
Of that goodness, the sovereign source of our law, liberty, and government, which is Almighty God. We have become a nation that is distance ourselves from the very foundation. Washington said that of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable sports. We've got to recognize that we've been separated by something that separation of church and state doesn't stand for. It doesn't separate us from God. Nothing can separate us from God. We are one nation under God, and we can become one nation unified. There's so much division in our society. Protest, demonstrations, mobs, racial strife. But we're all created in the image of God. I recall what Harry Truman said in his inaugural address. The American people stand firm in the faith which has inspired this nation from the beginning. We believe that all people are created in the image of God, and from that faith we will not be moved. We've been moved.
Okay, we're going to come back into the studio for this conversation. What I've been told by the control room is that he has been speaking about God, and about God almost exclusively, with, I think, so far no real reference to his opponent or Donald Trump. Roy Moore, Mike Murphy, Roy Moore has said that homosexual conduct should be illegal. He said that just a few years ago. It's the kind of thing that he is very likely to say publicly and possibly on the Senate floor if he makes it to the Senate. How will that be helpful to the Republicans as a party generally to have someone there in the Senate who they may be, some of them anyway, forced to disown from time to time?
Well, if he gets to the Senate, and I would say he's strongly favored but not certain in the general election, I think the Democrats will rename the Democratic National Building the Roy Moore Center for the boatloads of cash they're going to raise because of the inflammatory things he apparently likes to say and will probably keep saying. So he'll become a political embarrassment to a lot of Republicans, particularly from purple swing states. I think people will walk away from him and he'll be isolated. I think the shorter-term thing is how many primaries will he inspire, and will any of them gain real traction and put some incumbents in trouble? It's right that Bob Corker was probably thinking about that equation when he made his decision not to run. Not sure it drove it, but I'm sure it was a factor.
Yeah, and Jason, just on the Corker point, he did say when he first ran for Senate, he thought 2 terms would be about right. And 2 terms is what he's doing, so we don't know for sure whether this is what it is. But the Senate is a profoundly depressing place to work now in both bodies, but more so for the Republicans because they finally have a Republican president, and he is functionally, in legislative terms, out of his mind.
Right.
And they can get nothing done because he is so destructive to what they're trying to do.
He's destructive to them symbolically, he's destructive to them practically, but I'm not even going out on a limb here. I think Bob Corker is stepping down because he's going to check the win, he's going to check what's going on after 2018, and I think he might primary the president. I think that's what this is about.
Yeah, I mean, Ron, if you're looking for what would Bob Corker's political motivation be for getting out of there, separate and apart from what I was talking about, the absolute horror of the job now in the Senate. I think Jason's got a nicer bet there than he's afraid of a challenge.
Well, I think probably there's truth in all these things. Yeah. And and it does make sense to set himself up as a potential opponent to President Trump. But, more broadly, Lawrence, what you're really seeing is the consequence of the unraveling of the Republican Party. You've got today the president's principal legislative initiative, getting rid of the Affordable Care Act, going down, and his people saying that Mitch McConnell is to blame. And, obviously you saw in Alabama them trying to, Judge Moore ran very hard against Senator McConnell. And so it's going to be very hard to get anything done in the Senate if the president is attacking and his people are attacking and candidates are attacking and the Republican Party are attacking the Senate Republican leader. And as a result, he is 9 months into his presidency and doesn't have a single legislative achievement. So no surprise a Republican senator is retiring, maybe to run against him, maybe just to get out of it, certainly because he does not want to stand on the stump and have Donald Trump be campaigning for him in 2018. That's for sure.
Mike, as our experienced Republican veteran of presidential politics, what does it look like tonight for the, quote, reasonable man Republican, Bob Corker, challenging this president for the Republican nomination?
Well, I think there may be a lot of people challenging him. I think he'll be a one-term president because I think, and this breaks my heart as a Republican who would like to see our policy agenda get enacted, but we could have really rough midterms. You look at some of these state legislative races, and I think Ron alluded to one in Florida. There was an interesting, they're tiny districts, but interesting one up in New Hampshire in Rockingham County. The professionals in the Republican Party are looking around seeing our canaries in the coal mine are all choking. So we're looking at what could be a very rough midterm. And if we have a rough midterm, then I think the party's going to turn on Donald Trump because his brand has been winning. Well, we're not winning, and he's not ideologically connected. He's not really a Republican. He's a populist. So all those things could create the perfect storm, and I think there could be a long list of people who would look at primarying him if he even runs again. My crazy prediction is he'll start talking about creating his own third party, populist party to run, and kind of play that big card rather than face a Republican Party that may really have turned on him after a dismal 2018. Hope I'm wrong. I'd like to hold the Senate, which I think we will, and pick up seats and hold the House. But we could be in for a tough midterm here, and he's a big cause of it.
Mike Murphy and Ron Klain, thank you both for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up,